Welcome to Glass Houses, a Billy Joel podcast. I'm Michael Grosvenor.
And I'm Jack Fernino. Join us as we dig deep into Billy Joel's songs and history and what his music has meant to us.
Billy Joel, Glass Houses.
Billy Joel is no stranger to award shows and other accolades. Following 1977's The Stranger, he's won a handful of industry awards, was nominated for plenty more, and gave a few memorable and, in one case, literally show-stopping performances.
And when you're tracking award show appearances over 3 decades, you also start noticing trends and changes within the industry and its major players over the years.
But before taking our look back, we have some exciting news for Billy Joel fans. The core of the classic Lords of 52nd Street Band has reconvened to record with another East Coast piano player.
This year, Evan Toth recorded his new album, The Show, at Richie Cannata's Cove City Sound Studios on Long Island in Glen Cove. The record features Richie on sax and organ, along with Russell Javors on guitar and Liberty Devitto on drums, as well as current Lords bass player Malcolm Gold.
This marks the first time since 1981's Glass Houses that Richie, Russell, and Lib have all been on the same album. So, we sat down with Evan to discuss his music and his experience recording with the Lords of 52nd Street.
So before we dig deep into Billy Joel's award show appearances, nominations, performances, and awards from 1978 through 2013, we'll find out more about what it was like getting the band back together.
Hey, Michael. You remember a couple episodes ago where I said we weren't going to play anybody else's music on our podcast, and that one guy just got his one shot in, and that was going to be it?
I vaguely remember that.
Yeah, well, my plate is full as I eat my words.
That is true.
But definitely worth breaking my own rules for this one. It's a really great album. I really dug it.
It is, and while many, including Evan here, have been inspired by Billy Joel, this has a direct connection to the Billy Joel band. And to me, it was a no-brainer and a perfect fit for part of an episode here.
So we have a lot to cover this episode. We'll jump in a second, but the new album is called The Show. The first single should be out right around Billy Joel's birthday in early May. Evan Toth also has a podcast of his own, which he'll tell you about. And if you want to learn more, just head on over to evantoth.com, evantoth.com, or you'll find him on the socials as well.
And his new album is going to be all over all the streaming platforms and all the places you can legally purchase albums, Amazon, Apple Music, Spotify, everywhere. So we're going to let all you guys know on our socials when his record is actually out, because we really highly recommend heading over and supporting this guy, because this record is really great.
Let's jump into it.
Yeah, here we go. So we sat down with Evan as he was in the mastering process of this record, and he gave us a little taste of what to expect coming up and told us all about the story of getting the band back together, so to speak. So let's get into it. Here's our conversation with Evan Toth.
This had to end, you knew you'd be upon your way. So while we stand here saying goodbye, we got no time to get all mixed up in mistakes, little bride.
All right, Evan, thanks so much for being here with us today.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, Jack. Thanks, Michael. This is, I really appreciate taking time out of your day to do this and share this project with your audience. Love your podcast. I need to hear more of them. I need to dedicate some more time to really, I need to be stuck in more traffic is what I need. But I can.
So I love the setup. Evan hopped on the Zoom call here and he's got an upright.
Yep, I have my Yamaha U3 here. This is one of the largest uprights you could get. I wrote most of the album on this thing and dragged this thing around a few different places, and now it's here with me in this home. It's great, and I love, the power and the sound of it, so that's why I took the cover off and the full board and all that, so that I can really, when I'm playing here, blast it out, and it's very loud down here, so great piano, Yamaha U3.
Cool. So speaking of writing on it, this is your third album now that's coming out, right?
This is the third album. That's right. The first one was called Welcome Back to Hell. The next one, it was Everything is Fine. And this one's going to be called The Show.
Is there like a through line through all three, or at least the first two then?
Not really. This one's a little bit more of a conceptual thing where it's sort of thinking about a show, how you might put on a show. You have kind of a big beginning and then it kind of ends like the ending of a show. And the album cover, which I just shared. You guys are the first ones, by the way, to see the album cover.
Oh, cool.
Aside from me and my wife. It's like a New York City show, and I did cabaret in New York City for a long time. It's funny, especially since you guys are Billy Joel guys, there aren't a ton of rock bands with piano players. Being that, it's a hard way for, I think, a performer to kind of fit in and to do their thing, mostly because it's hard to find good pianos out there. If you want to bring your keyboard, that's fun and everything, but I mean, I think you guys understand the love that you have from, having a really big acoustic instrument like this Yamaha I'm sitting next to really play out live. And in New York City, there's a couple places. There's the Bitter End has a great piano, but mostly I found that the cabarets had great tuned pianos and smaller rooms, so I didn't have to get 3 million people to these shows. And, if you got 30, 40 people, you felt like it was a good show. Yeah. I love the piano, and I love playing a real acoustic monster.
Yeah.
What drew you to the piano?
The obvious answer is really, Billy Joel's music. I really loved him so much growing up. My dad had The Stranger and An Innocent Man as I was growing up. Interesting two albums, right? Those are the only two that we had in the house.
Huh.
So, yeah, it was just something about that piano that really interested me. And I'm kind of a self-taught guy. I did a lot of this by myself. I took some lessons at a certain point, but mostly I just kind of noodled around and found my way and did it that way. But I just love the dynamic range that you can get away with on a piano. It's a whole orchestra at your fingertips that you can do whatever you like with it.
You had also auditioned for Move It Out.
Yeah, it was about 20 years ago, as the song on the album goes. Yeah, I saw that, and it just seemed like, oh my God, how could I try to do this? And it seemed so intimidating. But I went, I stood in a long line around the block.
Yeah.
Met some really interesting guys. You might imagine who's trying out for this part, in New York City in 2003. It was just all these dudes. And sometimes the way these auditions are is some people, you just show up and give it your best shot. So some of them maybe didn't have piano chops or know what to do with that, but they just came and did their best. And that's what you do. You never know. Someone might see something and say, hey, we can use this. But yeah, I remember waiting in line and just walking up through this building, these stairs, just chatting with all these guys. And then they called me in. And as I was 20 years younger than I am now, I was petrified, terrified. But, I just tried to fake it. And I went in there and sat down. They had a big piano set up in front of this panel of folks. And they said, all right. I talked to them a little bit. I remember there was a couple of laughs. And then they said, okay, now play Scenes from an Italian Restaurant. Go. So I did the best I could, but I definitely I wasn't sure. It was a risk. It was a risk going to do that, but it was okay, and it was a good vibe. But I remember when I left, I walked back out in the hallway. All the guys in the hall, yeah, good job, you did good. So it was, I guess, noisy in the hall. So
right.
I was glad I didn't get the part, but I'm very glad that I had the support of the other guys hanging out in the hallway.
Yeah,
I mean, that sounds like a great experience either way.
Yeah, but again, it was definitely scary, intimidating, but showbiz, and it does kind of tie back into the album with the experiences I've had, and did Tony and Tina's Wedding for many years off Broadway, and I did the national tour. So I understand show business and I get those things. And the album does have, particularly that first song, The Show, does have some of the things that you would experience, being a longtime performer and, the guys are working for a cut of the door and, everybody just wants to have a drink and relax before the gig. And then when the gig is over, you got to get paid, and that's always a thing, and you got to chase down whoever it is in the club. And hey, by the way, we're leaving now. And then they want to count it, so there's a whole process that you go through being a performer, being a musician. And I wanted to just sort of encapsulate that a little bit. You don't hear too much about it, really. You don't hear too much about that story. You hear about the showbiz, the big stuff, the big stars and things, but there is a whole little world that I think just musicians and performers know, the nuts and bolts of the thing.
So with all that in mind, did you have it in your head when you started this album to make it sort of a concept around show business, or is that something that came about as you were writing it?
I think it kind of came about afterwards. I think I had the show done, and then the last song on the album is called "The Show Will Be Over." Duh, right? It's the last song. So it kind of bookends the other tunes. Yeah, I wanted it to run like it might run like a cabaret, like a 60-minute kind of a show, and have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And it's not like a total concept album, like here's act one, and we're going to go act, and let's have an intermission. I should have, there's no song called like intermission,
Right.
but.
Did you write this during 2020?
Well, some of the tunes have been kicking around a long time. Life of Leisure, in fact, has been one of my signature tunes for many years, maybe 15, maybe 20 years I've been playing that song. Hooking up with these guys, this was just sort of one of those moments where you go, wait a minute, I don't have a recording of this tune, and maybe life was waiting for me to connect with these guys to do it.
Let's talk about the musicians on this album.
Yeah, the reason I'm here, otherwise you guys would say, who cares about this guy's record?
Oh, we might put it on the...
The story is, and talk about things taking a long time, really about 10 years ago, when I got married to my wife, we're still married, we were on our honeymoon. I was sitting at the pool. We were in Rhode Island, and I was on Facebook. And 10 years ago on Facebook, it was a little bit of a different thing. You know what I mean? People didn't necessarily connect with one another the way they do now, and the doors weren't always open. And I saw, Liberty Devitto has a page. That's interesting. It's Liberty Devitto's area here, So, like, what if I just emailed Liberty Devitto, and it's crazy, and nowadays, again, that's sort of an approach in the year 2021 is a little different. I think people, even celebrities, are a little more used to having a slight connection with their fan base. But back then it was like, that's weird, that I could connect with him. So I did. And I said, here's my name, and I got some music out. He wrote back, said, stuff sounds good. Let's talk about it or something like that. And, years and years went by, and I didn't quite know how to do it or figure it out. Then I had another really good friend, Doug Kistner, who we'd worked together on a few rock and roll summer camps we did together. And he's a great keyboard player. And, he plays the keyboard parts in the Lords. He doesn't play the Billy parts. He plays the strings and all the extraneous keyboard things that the Lords need him to do. I found out just out of the blue that, the Lords of 52nd Street are playing together, these guys, Richie Cannata and Liberty and Russell Javors, and Doug is playing keyboards. I said, Doug, I got this crazy idea. What if I took what do you think they would do? I don't know. Doug's like a cool guy,
Yeah.
And he put me in touch with Andy, Andy Gilmartin, who manages the Lords, and the rest is history, and Richie was my next connection. And since we used Richie's studio, we used Cove City Studios in Glen Cove, Long Island. Richie became the go-between to help me set this up. So super grateful to all of them for being involved in this, but very grateful to Richie for taking an interest in the project, for understanding what I was trying to do, and for giving me the opportunity to set up what we set up.
Whenabouts was that this all started to come together?
Well, let's see. We all kind of lost a year of our lives with COVID. The last 12 months is kind of a blur for all of us. So I guess it would have been about 2.5, 3 years ago, 2.5, I guess, something like that. The basic tracks were done in about August of 2019. A few months went by, August to, March, and then boom. And you didn't know what to do. Nobody knew what to do. I didn't know what to do. And, everyone, I think, and I'm just speaking of the world, everyone was so deflated,
right?
What's the next step? So here I have this project sort of kicking around. And eventually I said, well, wait a minute. We can just wear a mask and go in the studio and do some of this, right? But luckily I'd had most of the work was done prior to the pandemic.
What was the process like working with the band? Was there a lot of rehearsal ahead of time, or was this a lot of arranging and putting things together in the studio?
Much like the Billy Joel albums, as I've come to understand, we just kind of sat down and did it. And in fact, I had done some demos here on this piano and made some basic recordings for them. And they'd listen to those kind of demos without a band. But once we got in the studio, it was just like, these guys were the musicianship that these guys have is just, it's almost like a mental telepathy where they're just like, all right, play this, and Liberty's just like, all right, play the song. How does, sing it. How does it go? Sing it. And I'm going, it's like that, and then he just knows, just knows. And, you get through one take and he's, all right, let's do it again. We can do it better. So we just kind of ripped through it. I would say Malcolm Gold, who plays bass in the Lords, when we were figuring out who should play bass on this, I said to Richie, I'd really love to have Malcolm because he's, connected with Liberty and you guys, and I know he understands that vibe and that sound. Malcolm, I feel like, did really just a ton of homework, and he really picked apart the demos. We'd all look at Malcolm. What was that? How should we do? What was it, Malcolm? He's like, no, it's a F sharp in the bass or something. What are you doing? And so it was good. He really did a lot of work on the tunes, and I think he really helped to gel it together, mostly because he helped to communicate. He knows them. I had just kind of met them once or twice before I found myself in a recording studio looking at them and saying, oh, hey, everybody, So Malcolm was kind of a good middleman for me, at least.
As it being Richie's studio, what producer or what role did Richie take in this?
Richie's interesting because, he's running a recording studio there too.
Right.
So he was sort of in and out, but he was there, man. He was hanging out. And again, I'm so grateful for the time and input and energy that he gave to this project. They're all, critiquing themselves and we're all critiquing each other. So you do something and you go in the control room and we all do the playback and it's like, you're going to do that again, or we'll try that again, or that was okay. That sounds good. That was it. It was pretty casual. We didn't really, again, back to rehearsals. And that was one of the things I think over that 10-year period that was like a mental stumbling block for me. I'm saying, what am I going to do? Get these guys in a rehearsal for a week, like in a rehearsal studio,
right.
And then we got to go to the record. Like, how would I set this thing up, Mm-hmm. Turned out we don't really have to do that. But again, as I had heard a lot of the, maybe not all the Billy Joel stuff, but I think it was pretty much they came in, Billy said, hey, I got this is something. And they went, okay, this is how it should sound. And again, back to that, almost like a mental telepathy, like Liberty just knows, you're listening to playback the first time after you play this with him and you go into the studio with everybody and, Richie and everybody's used to Liberty. So it's not like I have to sit down, like playing things that I've heard in my head for, 20 years or treating this music in a way that I loved growing up listening to the Billy stuff. And it was just such a shock. We're mastering it now and still getting used to hearing those tracks. Some of those fills and those and you guys are both drummers and, the thoughtfulness that goes into it is so crazy. And the linking up that he does with Malcolm is, it's like another planet. I was very fortunate to put this together and play the role that I played with them.
There's one song where Malcolm just goes all the way up on the bass. It just hits such a Doug Stegmeyer note and let it cut right through the mix.
They're all so tasteful, but Malcolm just really had some great licks in there. And if you love those Billy Joel albums, which I think your audience is fond of Billy Joel records, you're going to see that, that vibe. And also, as far as bass is concerned, the Stegmeyer family did give us the permission to use Doug Stegmeyer's blue Fender bass that I heard you guys talking about on the Bridge podcast. That was from the late 80s, 87 or whatever. I'm not sure exactly when he got that bass, but what a beautiful looking bass, and it sounds great. And I had loved the Russia videos growing up. To have that just sitting in the studio, had this aura of, we were fortunate to have that too.
Oh, that's so great. Yeah, that bass was, I believe, specifically on the Bridge tour. So Liberty's shells were blue. Doug's bass was blue. The lighting had a lot more blue and purples going on.
Yeah, it was some kind of a custom job, I thought.
Beautiful bass. And it sounds great.
So speaking of Billy, you mentioned that you have a pretty good Billy Joel collection on vinyl now.
Yeah, I know
Yeah.
it's not a video show, but I did bring some show and tell to class.
Yeah, I want to see a showdown between you and Michael because Michael's got the big collection too.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
I do.
Well, let's see. We'll try to do this in a way so folks can understand what we're talking about without having a visual. Have you guys ever seen this? This is Billy Joel. It's called California Flash.
Yeah.
And you guys know
have.
that tune. Is this the second Attila album or something? What is this really?
There was actually only one Attila album. Let me look at the track listing.
Wonder Woman and all that.
Yeah, so that's essentially the Attila record, the one Attila record.
I've never seen that on record. I've seen like cheap CDs of it, but I've never seen that put out on vinyl.
Yeah, this is actually Italian. The front is the same as the back, but it's pretty cool. I don't know. This is probably some 75, 76 Billy on the cover for our listeners at home.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
He's sort of in his angry young man pose there. He's
I see it.
Yeah, for everybody listening, he's got the vest and the tie and the button-down shirt, which is absolutely not what the original Attila cover looked like.
Yeah.
No, it's different, and I have that too. But I didn't want to bring that to you guys because you guys are pros. I'm not going to bring my Attila album out here. You know,
Right.
I didn't want to insult anybody. This is a Canadian pressing of Cold Spring Harbor. This is, of course, the original mastering. That's to me, You Can Make Me Free. Those original tracks are so great, and it's a shame that the reissue that came out in the early 80s missed out on all that stuff. Here is my, again, there's not much to see here for our listeners at home, but this is my test pressing of Street Life Serenade.
Ooh, nice.
That's awesome.
I had interviewed Liberty Devitto for my podcast as well, and I said, well, you must have all the test pressings and stuff like that. And he said, oh, yeah, like, no, they were just in the studio, like, you took one when you left. You brought it home and you listened to it when you got home because you wanted to hear what it was.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, I know, I get it. It's just you don't understand how cool that is. You know?
Right. Yeah.
He's just like, no, it's just like test pressings. Like, that's what you did.
So much cooler than taking home a CD or a cassette.
Or waiting for them to email you the MP3. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, or an MP3. Email me the MP3. Right. Here's my my copy of Souvenir. And it has my Richie autograph down there. Richie.
Oh, that's so great.
Richie scribbled on that. And this is interesting, and you guys know this, but Souvenir, I guess this was an effort for the record company they were always trying to get out Billy's back catalog, especially after The Stranger hit, right? So side 2 here is just album cuts. It's The Entertainer, I've Loved These Days, Captain Jack, Los Angelinos, and Say Goodbye to Hollywood. But on side A, it's selections recorded live December 5th and 6th, 1976 at Palmer Auditorium at the University of Connecticut and New London during the live videotaping of Billy Joel Tonight. And you guys will tell me what happened to the videotape of Billy Joel Tonight from 1976. I don't know. I'm figuring you guys probably have it.
That the actual VHS is super hard to find. That's one thing I do not have. I will say that Sony in recent years put each track from that show up on his YouTube channel. The full release is up there.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
With video?
With video. It's all video. And it looks and sounds great.
Yeah, who knows? They could do a DVD. Well, they're not doing DVDs anyway anymore. Here's Interchords. This is just an interview disc.
And I got to say, those are in fantastic shape. Back in the mid-'70s, those promo records were not well cared for, and those look great.
No, they are in great shape, and the Souvenir's in great shape too. And I said, Richie, just write your name on the front. So he did. So that one, I'm sure, I don't know what it's worth, but anyway, here's my Japanese copy of Glass Houses for you guys with the OBI strip there. It's a cool red strip. My favorite album is The Nylon Curtain, and this is my Japanese Master Sound copy of The Nylon Curtain, which I really love very much. Oh, and this just passed for Valentine's Day. This is a gift for Valentine's Day. Billy Joel, An Innocent Man. An Innocent Man, You're My Home Live, She's Always a Woman, and Until the Night. A very romantic album for Billy to share with his audience for Valentine's Day with a rose, embossed rose on the cover. But this is before, of course, And So It Goes, so I don't know where that rose is from.
Right.
And you don't see too many copies of River of Dreams on vinyl. This is the original pressing, which it's now been reissued, but this is the British pressing made in England, a UK pressing, and these are tough to come by.
That's interesting because you have the new remaster vinyl for River of Dreams, right?
I think I've got 3 total copies of it. I've got 2 of the 3 remasters. I think one's on blue vinyl, one's on black. And I think I may have a Holland pressing from 93.
And when I'm not playing with Liberty Devitto, I've got another great drummer, young guy. His name is Ben Saporito. And one day we're playing right down here, in fact. And he says, my dad was on River of Dreams. I said, what are you talking about? He says, no, yeah. His dad plays percussion on Great Wall of China. He's right here. I guess there's that sound, that ching, 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 ching sound. There's a weird percussion piece that from what I understand, Jim Saporito invented this percussion. It's sort of a weird little thing. Mm-hmm. If you listen to the track, obviously it'll jump out at you, but you might miss it if you aren't listening for it. But it's just a very, almost like a high-pitched kind of a tambourine thing.
Yeah. Those Japanese pressings, especially because you have Nylon Curtain, it's your favorite album. Do you hear a big difference on those?
The thing about Billy Joel albums from a vinyl perspective is that the American originals are so good. Those Ted Jensen, Sterling Sound pressings sound excellent. There are some bands, I think, during the 70s that had their albums come out in America, and maybe it wasn't such a great pressing, so the Japanese pressings can be better.
Right.
But in Billy's case, those albums were all mastered and pressed by the same people, which is really astounding because they didn't really do that. There must have been a lot of control over that chain of production because, again, it was over. I don't know what the first Ted Jensen master was. It The Stranger or was it prior?
I'll have to look that up. That's a good question. I know for sure he did The Stranger, and Bob Ludwig did one of the versions of The Stranger as well.
There was a Ludwig version?
I think that was one of those situations where it was selling so fast. They had plants going around the country, so I think they fired off a couple other masters of it.
Right. I mean, I love those. I love the Japanese pressings. It's hard to not love them for the added art, of those OBI strips. They look so cool. And, the Japanese pressings are known for being very, very quiet. There's no noise. These were records you could find anywhere. I mean, there are a gajillion of those albums out there. So, it's not very hard to find one in really good shape, but certainly the Japanese ones are fun to have. And
Now, I know with Billy's recording sessions with those guys, they were always notoriously fun and loose. Was it that kind of vibe going on with your sessions as well?
We didn't have a lot of time. I mean, everybody was in a fine mood. We were goofing around. But again, Billy had the luxury of knowing them very well. They had known each other for a million years and gotten to know each other on the road. So obviously they had plenty of room to fool around. And meanwhile, I'm like, I got 2 days or 3, whatever we had, 2.5 days or 3 days to do this. So, I mean, they worked hard. Again, it's not hard that it was bad. It was just hard work. And Liberty worked really hard. And, it was just one tune after the next. And you've heard the record, it's a lot of up-tempo stuff. It's not a lot of ballads. And Liberty, even when Liberty plays a ballad, so he's at 'em, which I loved. And some of those Take Like Life of Leisure, which is more of a ballad type song. As I said, I'd played that song for a long time, and you play it with different drummers and they're like, well, I'll just play something very peaceful, or I won't even play at all. I just want it to be, this should be your showcase. And Liberty just, and in my brain I say, that's what I don't want anybody being peaceful on this. That's exactly the vibe that I wanted.
And he got it.
And he got it. And I think drummers, because he's confident and because he's got the experience. But when musicians play together, as you guys know, you don't want to step on anybody's toes. And you've got this songwriter guy and he wrote this song and it means this to him. And you don't want to crash all over it, but Liberty knows how to do that and do it in a way that's tasteful and functional and works to put the song ahead. Again, just to be sitting there was like an out-of-body experience. You're just listening to this in your headphones and you're like, who's playing this? Who told him to play that? I didn't tell him to play that. He just did that. And it's a very exciting feeling. I think people have to understand too, with any great musician or any great filmmaker or author or anything like that, you have to have a group of people that just understands. You have fun and you see these documentaries of people playing basketball and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. And it's hard work to put an album like this together. It was hard work for them to do that. So in between takes or whatever, who knows? Although one thing that we really had in common with Billy Joel recordings, my album has it and a lot of Billy Joel albums have it. Very important. We ate Chinese food during the breaks. Apparently, Chinese food touch. Was a big. They always and we took a break, and I said, "You guys want to order? You guys want some Chinese? Let's do Chinese." And Richie, you got a good Chinese place here in Glen Cove, and then I don't know who said it, but somebody said, we used to always order Chinese food in New York City or wherever they were. So that's what really ties together these projects is Chinese food.
That's so great.
So tell us a little about your podcast.
Yeah, I've been doing radio and stuff for a long time, and I went to Fairleigh Dickinson University in Teaneck, New Jersey. I'm a New Jersey person. They have a radio station there, a longtime radio station, WFDU, at 89.1 FM on the dial here in New York City. And I've been there just about 20 years. I started as a student there and had a bunch of different shows. And so I currently have a show on Saturday nights. It's called the Toth Show, and it's at 6 p.m. on a Saturday night. They rerun it 5 a.m. on a Sunday, and then I do a Tuesday drive time in New York City. So that's like 6 a.m. to 9. The podcast is actually called Radar. It's called Radar, the interview segment. I also do a lot of writing. I just love music, and I connected with the Vinyl District, which is a really cool music website. The editor there, John, he's always looking for different things. And in fact, it was the pandemic, where sometime around June or something, I'm going, I got to do something else too. I wasn't recording and I wanted to do something. So I reached out to him and he said, how about a podcast for the show? So he gets some great PR from cool musicians and record labels and he passes them along and I reach out and I've, been lucky to connect with some really cool people. We had Cousin Brucey on and especially during this time, just to sit down with you guys and do this Zoom chat is so we wouldn't have done this a year and a half ago. I don't know how you guys did stuff a year and a half ago, but as difficult and as crazy as this pandemic has been, it's really been a great opportunity for people to just connect and use technology to do that. And that's been a fun part of doing the podcast, just reaching out and connecting with people I wouldn't have had the opportunity to do before.
Sure.
It's really cool to hear those things that musicians understand, and they're on a personal level, and I think a lot of other people can relate to that.
Now, with your new album, are you looking into the spring, right?
Yeah, I'm hoping for the spring. Like I said, it's out for mastering now. Michael Graves is mastering it. He's a really great engineer and won a few Grammys and a very nice guy, too. John Arbuckle at Cove City, he did a mix that was just great. I did some recording here in New Jersey, too, at a place called the Mozart Studio with an engineer. His name is Kostadin. He's very good, too. But we took the tracks back to, Richie. It seemed to make sense that we began the project in Long Island. Having that Long Island vibe was important to me, too, even though I'm a New Jersey guy. I love Long Island and the history and the lore that's connected to that studio. So John did a fantastic mix. I have high hopes for the master. And I think maybe we start with a single. I was thinking of There's Always Somebody Now. That's kind of a nice up-tempo track, and it features everybody. It's got a big old Richie Cannata sax solo in it. Russell's on there playing some really cool rhythm guitar. Reminds me a lot of his work on An Innocent Man. There's just kind of this, he did so many of those tunes. You hear those little rhythmic parts that he did, particularly on, it seems to pop out to me from An Innocent Man, but like on Keeping the Faith, there's that percussive thing happening through the whole track. This wasn't a thing to let's sound like Billy Joel, or these songs are Billy Joel like song. I wrote it like Billy, I wore a Billy Joel mask when I was writing these. It's not like that. It's just, look, I'm a longtime writer, and these guys are just some of my dream musicians, and the opportunity was just so ripe that they're playing together and an hour's drive away. So it's just a great opportunity to play with these guys. But we did, think about ways to do certain little things. Although Rich used to say, and initially when we were tracking, he said, well, you got to use a digital piano. And I'm like, well, Rich, I really want to play the piano. I'm playing with Liberty Devitto and I want to do that. Like, I want to play the piano because we were talking about the piano before. He said, yeah, it's going to be, you're going to get too much bleed from Liberty. He's a very hard player, as you guys know. And I said, okay. Well, what did you guys do with Billy? Like, how did you deal with that then? He didn't play a Korg, keyboard.
Right.
He said, no, Phil Ramone had a plexiglass cover built. Have you guys ever heard this story?
No.
No, I never heard the plexiglass. Go on.
That there was some kind of a cover that went over the piano. So they would mic the piano, and whatever was happening in the room around them didn't bleed in the piano mic. And Billy also, who's a very hard player, didn't have to worry about his stuff bleeding on anybody else. So I said, well, where's that plexiglass cover? Which, of course, who knows where that is? It's in a landfill in Jersey here somewhere.
I tell you, every time we do an episode, we're learning something new about Phil.
Yeah, every guest now has a Phil story. It's pretty funny.
Yeah, it's the same concept as the blanket. I'd heard the blanket too. I'd never heard about a plexiglass thing.
That's great. Well, let's take a listen. This is There's Always Somebody Now by Evan Toth.
I got a new place I can face all my demons, and maybe in time they will all run away. I got a new way I can say that I love when you stray, but I'm nowhere, no, I'm nowhere to be found. Now I know there's always somebody now. I got some new clothes I can wear out in public. I got some new shoes that don't care if it rains. I got some new lips I can kiss and a face I can miss, but I'm nowhere, yes, I'm nowhere to be found. But I know there's always somebody now. There have been times nobody seems to mind the pain. We all must live our lives. I won't live mine in There's gonna be rain in the latest of evenings, when even a dream and some hope won't keep you dry. But until then, I got time, and I know that you're mine. But I'm nowhere, no, I'm nowhere to be found. Now I know there's always somebody now. Now I know there's always somebody now. Now I know there's always somebody now.
Yeah, Richie he's just a terrific musician. He's a great piano player, and I'm like, he'd be noodling too a little bit, and I'd be walking around and there'd be some classical piece happening, and what is that? And it's just Richie playing, piano in there, and he's just got such a great understanding of music, and even doing these solos, you do a pass and then he's, well, no, let's try this again, or let me try this thing. It's always, there's always such a cool energy that happens when they're coming up with those parts, and particularly a solo. You want the solo to be what it is, and he's looking at me, well, what did you think about that one? I go, oh, that was good. And then he does something else. Well, what about that one? Yeah. Sure. They're all great to me. I'm sitting there like, sure, whatever. He's just such a cool musician.
Let's have a listen to another great song off of the show. This one is one of my favorites, and it features Russell on acoustic guitar, Richie with a beautiful tenor sax solo, and Liberty on drums. This one is called Life of Leisure.
Life of leisure. I could be the one not afraid to die. If you want to sit there and fake amnesia, but let me show you how to do it right. Every time I think that I got it all worked out, I got so much more to learn about. Let us find for the time. Maybe someone else could give me back what's mine. Let us find for the time. And I need you to know, wherever I may go, everybody's eyes will never compromise. I could be the one living in a life of leisure. I could burn money just to light my smoke. I never listened to any of my teachers. They never said nothing when they spoke. Sometimes I think that I got it all worked out. I got so much more to learn about. Let it find for the time. Maybe someone else could give me back what's mine. Let us find for the time. And I need you to know, wherever I may go, everybody's eyes will never compromise. I could be the one laughing in a life of leisure, knocking down drinks and nicotine, being the last in line of extinct creatures, making more money than a cash machine. Every time I think that we got it all worked out, we got so much more to learn about. Let us find for the time. Maybe someone else could give me back what's mine. Let us find for the time. And I need you to know, wherever I may go, everybody's eyes will never compromise.
Guys, I can't thank you enough. Again, I appreciate the work that you're doing, and just thinking back to when I was a kid, and I have a really good friend, John, who, he and I used to listen to these records and talk about them, and, we had that bond, but man, it would have been so cool to have some kind of a connection. People forget what it was like before the internet. You just had those records, and you had the liner notes, and you had the little tiny words, and you had the video that you would rewind, or, you would go by in a split second. So you didn't get a chance to really look at these things microscopically. And big kudos to you guys for doing that, and for seeing that there's an audience for it, for seeing that there's this catalog, this body of unique work that's out there that needs to be dissected. It's worthy of a collegiate level dissection, and you guys are doing it, and you're connecting with so many interesting people and so many interesting stories, and just congrats to you, and thanks for bringing me into that world a little bit. It really means the world, because I know how much you care about Billy Joel's music, and I care about it deeply too. So I appreciate you guys taking time to talk with me about it for real.
Evan, thanks so much for joining us today. It was a treat.
So now that we've seen the latest and greatest, let's go all the way back to 1978. As promised, the second half of this episode is dedicated to all of Billy's award show presentations, nominations, awards, and performances.
What was really fascinating was putting together these series of clips that we found online in sequential order, and not only his look, but the way he carried himself on stage accepting these awards, and as well as how these award shows drastically changed over the years.
Yeah.
It was really crazy to see everything evolve. Let's get into it. We're going to go all the way back to get things started to 1978 and the Grammy Awards.
This is a topic that we say this a lot, but it's really true for this one. You couldn't really do this without YouTube. I don't think anybody's got this sort of archive just sitting in their house on VHS.
As we were putting this together, it really helped that we were able to find so many of these clips going all the way back to, Phil Ramone acceptance speeches back in 79. Really helps tell the story and paint the era of a lot of these award shows.
When you're a kid and you start watching award shows, you get the feeling that there's some sort of community or there's some sort of party going on that you're just starting to become aware of. These celebrities clearly all know each other. And then when you watch 20 years of these, you see the faces change, and you see how the dynamic changes a little too.
These shows, I think, started out a little more reserved, a little more like suit and tie for everyone, a more formal affair, to being like a rock show in the later years.
You felt like it was more about the awards themselves, and you were more getting like a little peek behind the curtain, like celebrities were making in jokes and things like that. And then over time, it became more for the audience.
As time went on, these shows became more memorable for the performances. As a result, less and less actual awards were televised. 70 Grammys were given out at the dinner prior, and we're going to show 4 of them on TV.
So before we, back in my day, award shows,
That's right.
of all things, of all hills to die on.
I know.
All right, well, let's take a look at this. So Billy got on the awards scene in 1979 with The Stranger, and our list brings us through 2014. And if nothing else, it's interesting to see how he personally also changed in terms of look and style and presentation over the years. Because for his first awards, he wasn't even there.
Exactly. So in 1979, now you got to understand that, with award shows, they were giving out awards for music that came out usually the year or even 2 years prior, depending on the shelf life of the album. The 21st Annual Grammy Awards, which were held in early 1979, Billy was being nominated for songs off of The Stranger. And so this is the first appearance of Billy Joel Awards.
Mm-hmm.
And like Jack said, Billy wasn't there. I gathered that he and the band were on the road in Europe. That's kind of the vibe that I got from Phil. With Billy being gone, Phil was on hand to accept the couple awards on Billy's behalf.
And he mentions, I just saw Billy in Paris.
What we had here in 1979 was 5 awards nominated for the Billy camp here. We had Record of the Year and Song of the Year for Just the Way You Are. Now, Billy won both of these awards.
What's the difference between Record of the Year and Song of the Year?
So according to Grammy.com, they state Record of the Year deals with a specific recording of a song and recognizes the artists, producers, and engineers who contribute that recording, while Song of the Year deals with the composition of a song and recognizes the songwriters who wrote the song. So now with Billy, since he was the performer and the songwriter, he was the winner in either case.
Billy got both for Just the Way You Are. He was not there, so Phil Ramone came up twice.
And he looked so genuinely surprised and happy for Billy. It was a real sweet moment, actually. You could tell the love that he had for them.
On the Song of the Year one, he says, yeah, this was a total shock.
Okay, the Song of the Year is...
Just the Way You Are, Billy Joel, songwriter.
I neglected to say something. It's a total shock tonight. And I just left Billy in Paris. He was over there at concert. And I know he'd be just thrilled to death. And I thank you for him and for everybody.
But yeah, he looks really happy about it, really genuinely.
Yeah.
Phil did a lot of work with a whole lot of big names and a whole lot of session musicians and these road dogs and got a lot of great studio work out of them. And you know, I'm sure that had an impact on everything. So
The Record of the Year is... Billy Joel, Just the Way You Are. Phil Ramone, producer.
Well, there's no way I could tell you we feel that way. I'm Billy's best friend, I think, at this point, and certainly to say thank you to Elizabeth and everybody else that's been involved with the record. And the band has made Billy and I just the greatest thing together in years. Thank you so much for him.
And Phil himself won a couple of awards at the same ceremony.
For Record of the Year as well. So since that was the recording, Phil being the producer of Just the Way You Are, he won an award for that. But also Phil was nominated for Producer of the Year, non-classical. He did not win that one. Also in 1979, Billy was up for an American Music Award for Pop Rock Male Artist.
And only nominated.
Mm-hmm.
He cleans up the next year, though, at the 22nd Annual Grammy Awards. Looking at 52nd Street, this is in 1980. Between Billy and Phil Ramone, they get 4 nominations, and they win 3 of them. Honesty is nominated for Song of the Year, but doesn't make it. However, 52nd Street wins Album of the Year and Best Pop Vocal Performance Male.
Mm-hmm.
And Phil Ramone wins Album of the Year, I guess, for producer.
Yeah, so being Album of the Year, the producer of the album also gets the Grammy as well. Also for 1980, Billy was up for 1 American Music Award, again for Pop Rock Male Artist.
And then 1981, here he is cleaning up again. Billy and Phil are nominated for 4 Grammys again this year. Album of the Year, and that goes to Billy and Phil Ramone as the producer. They don't win that one, but Billy does win Best Rock Vocal Performance Male.
There's a great clip of this acceptance speech, which is the first Billy appearance for an acceptance speech. And you have Barbra Streisand and Barry Gibb presenting the award.
Just talking about that thing again with like the in crowd or whatever, the in jokes thing. I don't know what the joke was. I feel like she says, I feel like I'm cheating on Neil Diamond. And then Barry Gibb kisses her. It's like, who the hell knows what they were talking about?
Yeah, I didn't get the joke. But then again, I was never following their careers.
Did they do a movie together? Neil Diamond and Barbra Streisand?
Was that the Jazz Singer?
Was she in the Jazz Singer?
Neil Diamond was, right?
Yeah. Neil Diamond wasn't in the Star Is Born, right?
Well, they did a duet of You Don't Bring Me Flowers, which was a big hit in 78. But what's that from? So maybe they were just referencing the duet of that song.
They recorded You Don't Bring Me Flowers in a room together. They were also old friends. This is from Stereo Gum. So Billy, played by Sasquatch, comes up and gets the award here. You know, he's a guy that clearly, on the one hand, cultivated a look and then made maybe 2 or 3 conscious changes to that cultivation.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he looked like he looked in the 70s until An Innocent Man, and then he looked like the 80s through Stormfront, and then he looked like the 90s. You know,
Yep.
pretty much every decade. In between tours, he would grow out a beard. And the beard this time was just out of control. This is like 1971 beard. This is a mighty beard. This is an unkempt beard.
Yeah. Like, I have a feeling that, like, this is about as formal as he was feeling at that stage in his career. He dressed up more at live shows in the 70s, actually.
He was aloof about it. You know, he makes the joke. He goes, okay, Mom, I'm here.
My mom wanted me to come. The first thing he does when he walks up on stage is he just leans into the mic. He goes, hey. He's just so uncomfortable up there.
Take bets, take bets. Billy Joel, Glass Houses.
Thank you. Hey. Okay, Mom, I'm here, all right? My mother wanted me to come. I'd like to thank my mother for playing for the piano lessons for all those years. And the guys in the band, I haven't seen them yet in tuxedos. I want to have a good laugh later. And Phil Ramone. What do you do, Phil? What is it actually? And my wife, Elizabeth. Thank you.
And he just shrugs and like kind of wanders off. As the band plays the cocktail schmaltz version of Don't Ask Me Why.
The Vegas Review. And that was another hallmark of award shows during that time. The live band playing some of the cheesiest versions of the pop hits of the day.
Yeah, I mean, by the late 70s, that must have been just so out of style.
I think just a few short years later, that was gone.
Oh, and then he wins the American Music Awards. Third time's the charm for him.
Yep.
Brings it home for Best Pop Rock Album with Glass Houses this time.
Mm-hmm.
Is also once again nominated as Best Pop Rock Male Artist. Doesn't win that one, but does get the album.
Again, not on hand for this award show. He wasn't a big fan of going to him these days. It seemed pretty clear. But presenting the award that he won for Best Rock Vocal Performance Male, it was Grace Slick and Ted Nugent.
What a combination.
I was just surprised to see Ted Nugent there at all. Like, he just seemed like that would be the last place he would be.
I'll just mention this now because it doesn't have to do with Billy. Like, at what point Iggy Pop takes an award for David Bowie, who's not there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, the hell is Iggy Pop doing here? Let alone dressed nicely.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what's happening? Yeah. So, yeah, Ted Nugent, manages to get the word machete into his 30 seconds up there.
I know.
I'd love to know what they thought of each other, to be perfectly honest with you. Not only, like, opposites, but, like, they were both pretty digging their heels kind of people,
When they say they are going to accept the award on his behalf, and Grace Slick says that, Nugent's just like, yeah, like completely uninterested. I don't know. I get the feeling that he probably felt like he was too hip for Billy Joel.
And the winner be. Didn't bring my machete here. All right. Let her rip.
Glass Houses, Billy Joel. Accept that for Billy. He's in New York. And thank you. All right.
Yeah.
Now we're getting into the 80s, and it's like, now you start seeing those 60s guys like just starting to out of phase.
Yeah, Nugent's big era was the early mid 70s, and so he was kind of starting to fall out of popularity. Phil Ramone actually also did get nominated and won a Grammy for Producer of the Year in 1981 as well for non-classical.
Mm-hmm. Not that he doesn't deserve it, but it's funny that he wins it for such a stripped down album. Knowing what we know now about Songs in the Attic, it's kind of funny that he didn't get on the radar for that one. I mean, like,
right.
You don't usually see live albums at the award shows, but knowing, the amount of craft that went on behind the scenes in that, being that it was the first digital recording, they grafted so many different takes from so many different places, being that it was a concept live album in that it wasn't just, here's what they were playing on that tour. It was like this recasting of these old songs. Funny, even just going down to how Bradshaw Lee was telling us that in this case and in other cases, they didn't use clean audience sounds that production houses just had in stock. Even if it wasn't the exact spot that audience was cheering, they used an audience from that show in that room. Billy and Phil give everybody a break. They give 1982 to some other people.
Yep. So Billy wasn't nominated for anything on the Songs of the Attic cycle.
And I guess it's telling that he's only nominated for the Nylon Curtain. The Nylon Curtain is certainly his most ambitious work. On that side of the glass, we were just saying that Songs in the Attic was pretty ambitious from the producer side, from the production side anyway. And I guess the Nylon Curtain wasn't quite as popular as the albums around it, but certainly had a couple landmark songs on it. No awards here, but, as they say, it's an honor just to be nominated.
Exactly. And speaking of just an honor to be nominated, now we enter a long stretch of Billy being nominated and not winning any awards. This would go on to be the case through the remainder of the 80s here. In 1984, the 26th Annual Grammy Awards, Billy came away with 2 nominations, one for Album of the Year for An Innocent Man, and another for Best Pop Vocal Performance Male for Uptown Girl.
Back on the American Music Awards, he's nominated for Best Pop Rock Video for Tell Her About It. Once again, Best Pop Rock Male Artist. Just nominations, though. Also, the MTV Music Award in '84 for Uptown Girl.
Here's for Best Male Video.
And here they are, the best boys of the year.
David Bowie, China Girl.
And when I get excited, my little China girl says, oh baby, just you shut your mouth.
Herbie Hancock, Rocket. Michael Jackson, Thriller.
You hit the door slam, realize there's nowhere left to run.
Billy Joel, Uptown Girl.
Uptown girl, she's been living in her white bread world, as long as anyone with hot blood can.
Lionel Richie, All Night Long.
All night long.
And the winner is David Bowie's China Girl.
Now, we have to mention what a sin the 1984 Best Music Video Award was. Because I was just on a thread talking about this with some other musicians. David Bowie wins, and it's no slight on David Bowie, but Michael Jackson does not win for Thriller. Like, what alternate timeline are we living in?
Right. Think about the videos he had for the Thriller album. You had, obviously, Thriller, Beat It, Billie Jean. I mean, these are like landmark videos.
And this is the one where Iggy Pop takes the award for David Bowie. What has also kind of resurfaced on those vulture-ish classic rock websites or whatever, Ultimate Classic Rock or whatever, is the MTV interview where David Bowie takes the VJ to task about not playing more black artists.
Oh, that was such an uncomfortable interview.
And I believe that David Bowie also threatened to pull his videos if they didn't change that policy.
Well, so the story goes, Walter Yetnikoff, who was the chairman of CBS Records at the time, who was Billy Joel, Bruce Springsteen, Michael Jackson, basically said, these videos are amazing. Michael Jackson is a legend. If you're not going to play Michael Jackson, well, now you're not going to get Billy Joel. Now you're not going to get Bruce Springsteen. MTV ultimately changed their tune, and in a big way, ultimately, because, Michael Jackson and so many of the other African-American artists became some of the landmark video makers of MTV's history. Real quick, too, back on the Grammy front, Phil Ramone also did get a nomination in 1984, Producer of the Year Non-Classical. So the next nomination is going to be in 1985, and this is typically an off-cycle year for Billy, but it was actually a nomination for Best Video Album for Live from Long Island.
All the big Billy fans, we all know it, but this is one that's been out of print, and so not as well known now, despite it being a fantastic document and concert.
And it's funny to think, this was 1985, so this was going into the era of Billy Joel Greatest Hits Volume 1 and 2. So a very mid-80s Billy Joel getting nominated for something from the Nylon Curtain Tour.
And speaking of mid-80s Billy Joel, that's it for him for a few years. So we don't get anything for The Bridge. It's a little strange that he doesn't even get a nod for the Russia album. Like, it's not the best album, but given its landmark status, it's surprising that it doesn't get a nomination anywhere for its cultural relevancy.
The album, or even the documentary and concert film that came along with it.
You would think even producer, just for getting behind the Iron Curtain.
While the mid-late 80s were kind of a quiet year for Billy, he did make an appearance at the 1988 Grammys doing New York State of Mind. And the only one from the band who was with him was Liberty. And then you had David Sanborn on saxophone.
Last time we really saw Billy, it was when he was Grizzly Adamsing it up after Glass Houses. And he is clearly a little more comfortable with himself now. It's a little bit of a rock star moment. And we know that, The Bridge was sort of his rock star album. Liberty's the only one. And that must have been his set. That's a Liberty drum set if I ever saw one.
Tried to figure out the whole reasoning behind it.
I like the effect that you saw the players in the background shuffling around and getting set up at the very beginning.
Yeah, it just felt very candid, like something you usually don't see on an award show.
And although all the players in the background are shrouded, they're pretty much just silhouettes, you can tell, if by nothing else, Liberty's unceasing left leg, that he must have been such a busy child, as they called them back then. Because here we are playing a down-tempo ballad, and his foot is just going like 16th notes to the quarter.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Billy Joel.
Some folks like to get away, take a holiday from the neighborhood, have a flight to Miami Beach or to Hollywood. Me, I'm taking a Greyhound on the Hudson River line, 'cause I'm in a New York state of mind.
This is where you get a glimpse of Billy's look kind of transitioning into the early 90s look. So here he's kind of starting to look like Stormfront, which was the album that came next. With that album came this whole nother big slew of nominations. We're starting things off on the 32nd Annual Grammy Awards, which were held in 1990. Now, not only did he have a bunch of nominations, which we'll get into, but he was also tapped to open the show with a live performance of We Didn't Start the Fire.
What a weird directorial decision this was. Not that he did the song, because it was clearly all over the place. But do you want to describe what this looked like?
It's strange in a couple ways, because I always felt the Grammy stage was a decent sized stage, but the band is like really tight in the center of the stage. Now Billy's out front with a guitar, no keyboard, no piano, no nothing. Obviously We Didn't Start the Fire is a guitar driven song. You had the current lineup on stage with him: Liberty Devitto, Crystal Taliaferro, and Mark Rivera just playing percussion. I think Mark is playing timbales, and Crystal may have a couple congas.
Yeah, the conga with the bongos on top.
Pretty sparse. There's not much on stage. And then obviously you had David Brown on guitar, and I think Jeff Jacobs was on keyboards, and Skylar Deal on bass.
But the thing was, they're tight in the middle, but they had these huge screens on either side and above the band, and they were flashing images that go along with the lyrics. So they say Harry Truman, and you see a picture of Harry Truman for a microsecond, and then they go on to the next one. Have you ever seen Rain, the Beatles, sort of like Broadway's tribute act? Reminded me of that.
Yeah.
Like when they have the TVs on stage and stuff. That's great, but they go with a static shot from like halfway down the theater. Everybody on stage looks tiny. You see a good dozen or 24 rows of people just sitting politely, watching the performance. It's so odd.
Yeah.
Either this director sucked, or he was a visionary rebel that was just like, well, I'm just going to do something weird.
Right.
And not for nothing, like, yeah, the images going by looked good, but how obvious was that? Like, what else are you going to do?
Yeah, such an easy thing to do. You know, when the show ends, they had that row of flames that went in front of Liberty's drums that went up.
Yeah. Ooh, yeah. They got flames for the fire song.
Worst pyro ever.
Yeah. Crystal sounds good. Crystal comes through in the mix very strongly at the end.
Yeah, and this begins the era, her getting featured pretty prominently on the live shows. And yeah, she sounded really good. You know, it's worth noting too, Billy mentioning that, you know, he was approached to do this, and Billy being Billy, he's like, nah, I don't want to. I'm on tour. He's like, that's more important to me. In fact, he was in the Midwest during the week that the Grammys were. I started to kind of figure it out. The Grammys was like within a week or two of the show I saw in Detroit. And he's like, I don't want to like fly in for 2 days and fly back. And he just didn't want to disrupt the tour. Yeah. Apparently, so the story goes, the Grammys also wanted him to lip sync. And he's like, no. He's like, if you want me to do this, and the only way I do this is if me and my band play it and sing it live. Like, I know they've forever been doing that with the dance acts. And, you know, the R&B acts who are dancing heavily and pop acts who did a lot of choreography.
But it's a dance, you know.
Exactly. For an artist like Billy, it's absurd to me. I can't believe they even asked him to do that.
Yeah, that's weird. Well, he'll get his revenge in a few years, but we're not quite there yet.
Exactly. So after this performance, we get another round of nominations. So he was nominated for Record of the Year, Song of the Year, and Best Pop Vocal Performance, Male, all for We Didn't Start the Fire.
Yeah, Stormfront as an album doesn't even make an appearance anywhere, but it's all about this song that was, it was just huge. You couldn't escape it back then.
It was one of his biggest hits, for sure.
And true to form of it being everywhere, he's back up for nominations for the MTV Music Video Awards. He gets 3 nominations: Art Direction, Visual Effects, and Cinematography. I'm assuming that's what that meant.
Yeah, I'm just not reading it.
Dude, all right. Maybe this will make it and maybe it won't, but we're both reading a spreadsheet. And one of us, I won't say who, but his name starts with M, wrote Cubanatography. And what you don't know is, like, at some point in the last 15 minutes, I subtly went over to another thing and searched Cubanatography to see what I didn't know about. I was like...
That's right. Hey, man. What happens when you're doing a bunch of research? Something's about to get misspelled.
Yeah, but it looks like a real word. I'm like, man, I went to film school for a year. How did I not know what that was? Anyway, so he doesn't win any of the MTV Video Music Awards. But there is one more award this year that he does win. And based on what he says, I think he's happy with the fact that he won this one, even if it was like almost at the expense of the others. And the sound of that tape spool can mean only one thing. We did not plan this episode out that well. So here's what happened. We thought the award show bit was going to go by quick, and we thought the Evan Toth interview was going to go by quick. And Evan Toth gave us a fantastic interview, really, really great conversation. And we found out there was a lot more to talk about with these award shows than we thought. So we're going to stop here for now. We're going to pick up the rest of the award show appearances 2 episodes from now. And in our next episode, you'll enjoy another fantastic conversation with Hyung Ki Ju, who played piano on Fantasies and Delusions. Michael, you want to tell them again where to find all of Evan's stuff when it comes out?
Yeah, absolutely. If you visit his website, evantoth.com, that's EVANTOTH.com. And then if you search Evan Toth on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, you can find his artist pages there. His new record, The Show, which is coming out, is absolutely fantastic. And having the Lords of 52nd Street involved gives it that Billy Joel touch that I'm sure you all heard with those couple songs there. So we don't have a firm release date yet, but if you check out his website and socials, and we'll also post when it's going to be available as well.
And of course, we're kicking it back to you guys now. Let us know what you thought of Evan's songs. Please go follow him, by the way, on all the socials if you haven't already. Tell us about any experiences you had watching these award show appearances on TV. If anybody happened to be there, we'd love a behind-the-scenes story like that. As you can tell by now, we love any kind of behind-the-scenes story, and that would be a pretty interesting one to hear, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. With TV broadcasts especially, your experience is what the director and the camera operators show us. So to have a broader experience than what we got to see on TV or on YouTube years later, it would be really interesting. So yeah, if any of you have any personal experience with these award shows, send them our way.
And for now, hit us up. Let us know what you think. glasshousespodcast@gmail.com. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Glass House is a Billy Joel podcast. And of course, if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, please help support us by giving us a 5-star rating and a positive review. Every 5-star rating and positive review gets us in front of more listeners. It's a quick, easy, and free way to help support us.
So we've got a couple of great episodes right on deck, including, like we said, this part 2 of our award show appearances. So stick around. We'll see you then.
Don't care if it's Cannata or on a riverside, no. I don't have any reasons. I left them all behind. I'm in a New York state of mind.